Nothing like a healthy dose of AI slop to draw in the kinds of people who would watch my videos. Those of you with an especially keen eye on production quality may not be surprised to hear that I mostly work in print media. Everything's just more convincing when printed on the skins of dead trees. Anyway, I'm in an almost unique position as I own both the Rhino and the Beast, so I thought that the least I can do is try to share my experiences, and this way I can reach a wider audience of potentially interested and otherwise special people. I'm gonna state the obvious many times during this video, but just to hammer the point home. Both the Rhino and the Beast are DIY projects, and there is no single Rhino and especially not a single Beast. For example, I have no experience on the Monster Rhino that is supposedly somewhat stronger than the regular one. The Rhino in the test is the quote-unquote official one from VP Force, and the Beast is the 51 Nm unit built by GVL 224 in early 2026. So, enjoy, or, well, I don't know. I'm not judging you if you enjoy weird stuff. Okay, this is the big one. So I've had the Rhino for 3 years and now the Beast for about 3 months. And this is the full power Beast with the adapter. And 3 months isn't lifetime, but I think it's enough to make some kind of conclusions already. So here it starts, the Rhino against the Beast. And it's going to be kind of an interesting story. But I'm going to start with something interesting because I'm going to be talking a lot about force. And a lot of force, because that's what the Beast does. And it's probably really hard to kind of fathom what it actually means if you've never tried a thing like this. And I can't really relay that information into your brain, but I'll try to describe what it's actually like and what it means to be this powerful stick between your legs. But let's start with a misconception I've run into quite often. And it's about the amount of force and what it actually is like and what it does to your controllability. So this is basically the full power of this specific Beast. It's the GVL 224 made Beast, 51 Nm model, so I think it's like one of the stronger beasts out there. Probably not the strongest, but it's a strong beast. And with those settings, it means that my maximum pull right now is going to be something between 17 and 18 kilos, and there's a lot of damping involved also. So for a joystick, that's a magnificent amount of power. However, this is quite interesting. So you might think that 17 to 18 kilos, which is, by the way, what many planes actually, like for example the F-18, do in reality. So you might think that that's a lot of force, and in a way that is, but here's the thing. Check this out. So this is the Beast, this is 17 kilos of maximum force, and this is one finger. And I'm not really in that training. I could do a lot more. One finger. So yes, it's a lot of force for a joystick, but it's actually not an incredible amount of force for a human being, because we are surprisingly strong, and this is actually one of the strongest things we do, like pulling like this. And 17 to 18 kilos of pull like this is not actually that much. One finger, no problem. And more importantly, the misconception, and I'm calling it a misconception, and I also had it, so I understand where it's coming from, is that when you have a stick that is this heavy in force, it's bad for controllability, when in fact it's actually the opposite. Now let's pick this Apache up here. Now I'll try not to balls it up completely like I usually do, because I'm rusty with it. But if you take note of what I'm doing with this stick, my heme and muscles are of course bulging all the time as usual, but I'm not stressing out here like very much at all. I'm just two-fingering it basically. And that's the thing, I'm not doing 17 kilos here, not even close. And most of this really like precise flying is done very near the center, where the forces are not very large at all. And in fact, near the center, if I didn't have this much force in the stick, I probably couldn't feel much at all, so I'd basically just try to react to what the helicopter does. But now, even when I'm really close to the center at the minimum force range, I'm feeling something, like maybe a couple of 100 grams what I'm putting into the stick, but I can actually feel that in a way. And that helps me control. It doesn't make it more difficult at all, it actually helps with control. And oh, by the way, the force trimming in this is just utterly fabulous when it has this much power. And I'm not going to spoil the end of this video, the actual conclusions. I'm just going to say that the power of the beast and the precision of the beast combined with the Apache is one of the most incredibly perfect experiences I've ever had with a control, and this is like mind-bogglingly fabulous. The amount of control and the ease of control is just mind-boggling. Like, this is utter madness, and I've tried most of the controllers out there and I've been doing this for decades, and I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that before. Like, the Apache and the Beast is a match made in heaven. And now don't get me wrong, the Rhino is also amazing with this. But the added power and the added control ability that comes with it, and the confidence in control, like, I'm making absolutely minimal movements here, but I still feel that I'm doing it. And it's not heavy, but it's like something. It's very solid. And if you have like 3 or 4 kilos at max pull, the stick is going to be super light in the middle and you don't feel anything at all. And also the trimming is super solid with these. One of the main differences between force feedback and regular sticks is, if you really like detents, the force feedback isn't great with detents, because it's hard to have such a solid centering force when you have motor that can only apply force to one direction at a time, so it's going to end up fighting itself in the middle if you give it really hard center. But I'd say this is like super solid center right here, right now. And the sensors are extremely precise, and the feeling is just absolutely amazing right now. Like, I could just keep doing this forever. This is what I've been looking for from a controller, so yeah, I guess it's a bit of a spoiler. The Beast is an absolutely lovely device, so awesome job GVL and Propeller. But the story is going to be a bit more complicated than that. The Rhino has a lot going for it too. And well, you probably won't be going badly wrong either way, whichever stick or base you choose, but yeah. The force of the beast is absolutely amazing. Like, I don't have words for this. And what it gives to you is the realistic experience of force, some physicality, but also controllability. So as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely a misconception that you lose accuracy and precision when you get more force. Now probably if we were talking about tons, like literal tons of force, but when it's in this range, like 17-18 kilos max, where the beast is at the moment, or this specific beast, it's just absolutely beautiful and immensely controllable. So I wanted to start with that because when it's a comparison between the beast and the Rhino, the amount of force is going to be a big part of it, and I want to give you some understanding of what it actually means to have that much power. So most importantly, controllability doesn't go anywhere, it just improves. And second of all, 17-18 kilos is a lot for a stick, but it's not that much for a human being. Like, this is not an uncomfortable amount of force at all. And you are not going to be doing lots of that maximum deflection stuff anyway. And when you do, it's kind of useful that the stick tells you that, hey, you are doing something really weird right now. Are you sure about this? So that's chapter 1 in this comparison. The immense power of the beast is just one side of the story, and it's quite interesting and fantastic, but there is a lot more to this comparison. And we are going to take a quick look at the software. This is not a full comparison for a couple of reasons. First of all, my Rhino is so old that I think I need to update the board before I can use the latest versions. So this is not the latest Rhino on the left. And I think this is currently the latest beast on the right, but again, this is a moving goal. The software is constantly developing, so it's really hard to make meaningful comparisons. And when you're looking at force feedback devices, the software is really important because the native support is usually so bad. So yeah, it's kind of hard to compare because, like I said, it's a moving goal and it's really important at the same time. But I can say that both of these devices do the basic functions pretty well, so there's nothing badly missing from either. So one is okay and one is better, but I'll take a look superficially, let's say. I have a couple of interesting points I want to make here, so let's get to it. So we have the VP Force Rhino on the left and the FFBeast on the right. Now, I was talking about firmware, and that's where the differences start. Basically, if I remember correctly, on the Rhino, it tells you, hey, I have new firmware, or you just click on a website, update the firmware, and there you go, you are done. On the FFBeast, though, there's the DFU mode here. You switch to DFU mode, and then you need to download a free external software. It's quite complicated software, but the operation is not that difficult and it's well explained in the instructions. But you do need external software, and you need to download the hex file directly to the board. And it's not really complicated, but the Rhino is a bit easier in that regard. Now, another super important consideration on any device. I had some trouble initially when I received the FFBeast pedals. My computer couldn't connect to the board and I couldn't update the firmware. And the support I got from GVL was absolutely fantastic. Like, you couldn't ask better. He's really good at answering, he's really quick, really smart guy, he knows his stuff, and we got it figured out. I actually needed to buy a relatively cheap device for updating firmware on that specific board. But now I have one, and on a positive note, it's not really possible to brick the hardware anymore. I can download the firmware anytime I want, whatever happens. And it wasn't a huge deal, and GVL was really good, and everything is working perfectly right now. I've also seen Propeller 3D, the creator of the FFBeast project. He's very active in his Discord, and you can get really good support from there too. So the FFBeast support has been absolutely fabulous. But so has the VP4 support. I've been talking to Valmis on a couple of occasions when I had some problems, and I always got response really quickly. And of course, both Valmis and the FFBeast guys, they are super experts because they create all this stuff, so they understand it perfectly. So this is the big difference between huge companies and these garage guys. Because when you're talking to these guys, you're talking to the guys who created the whole thing. So the support is going to be amazing, and so far both have actually delivered fantastic support when I needed it. So that's like a big plus to both projects. But like I said, the firmware update, it's not super difficult on either, but it's just quite a bit more easy on the Rhino. And then when we look at the Beast, so let's check out these couple of options. So the main power setting is in the controller here. It's the power limit, and it's at 40 right now. And this is actually kind of arbitrary number as far as I can tell. It's at 40, but this number provides the specified power of this specific Beast. About 51 Newton meters when I have this at 40. If I increase it further, I don't know what happens. No idea really, but I suspect it will probably just saturate at some point, and you will just get full power at like half deflection or something. It's probably not going to explode, but this 40 is basically the max power setting for me. And it's important to note that when I'm talking about the Beast, it's actually not the Beast. It's the Beast made by GVL 224, both joystick and the pedals. And we are looking at the joystick here. So do note that the power is only at 40, but it's, as far as I can tell, pretty much the max power on this unit. And yeah. So calibration, magnitude and speed, well, just related to calibration, and I haven't really touched these settings at all. I have set this one, but not these ones, so they are probably correct. And braking resistor, there's like a big resistor inside that's supposed to suck some power out of your movement, because when you move the stick fast at high powers, you are generating electricity power. And there's a resistor that's supposed to sink some of that excess power. And like I said, I haven't touched this number, but that's what it does. It's supposed to protect your electronics inside from surges created by you. And these are related to the general function of the device. Not really sure what, and I haven't touched this, and I haven't seen the need. And these are P and I gains. Well, I'm not going to start explaining this stuff. It's, well, in a way complicated, but you can find out easily how this works. And again, I haven't touched these numbers. Pole pairs basically tells you what kind of a motor you are working with. 15 pole pairs on the specific motor, and this is an important number to get just right, and I suppose it is because I haven't touched it. 15 is supposedly quite common on these hoverboard board motors. Encoder CPR tells you what kind of a encoder you have, and that's basically its resolution, and when the system knows that it knows what it's working with, it can calibrate the device and so on. And same stuff for both axes. So this is basically the main power, and this encoder CPR and pole pairs, super important stuff for the proper function of the device. Like I said, there are very many totally different kinds of beasts out there, so you have to enter all this stuff. The Rhino kind of already knows what it has. So then we go to the effects page, number 1. We have 2 axes again. Motion range not set by me, so it's probably correct. So this is the total effect strength, which is 100% of these. So it first takes this value, and then here I can reduce that value further, but I'm just basically passing through everything I get at 100%. And integrated spring strength basically just tells you what kind of spring power you have when you don't have any kind of profile loaded. I'm not using soft stop on this device. By the way, I am using these soft stops on the pedals, and there the absolutely awesome power of the beast is super useful, because the soft stops on the pedals are like kicking a wall. So you can just set whatever kind of travel you need, and that's it. And this is super nice, this soft stop. There is actually nothing soft about that. Then we have the dampening, and I'm giving it about 25 of something. And again, I probably should just punt this all over to 100. But then it would have incredible amount of dampening when I don't have a profile loaded. So this is kind of a compromise, so that if I don't have a profile, I still have a nicely working stick. But I actually usually use some kind of a profile when I use the beast. So let's see. So this is kind of well, this is same for the DirectX for force feedback stuff. Like I'm just passing through the maximum constant force and spring force, and then I'm kind of reducing the periodic forces a bit, because like I said, this is basically what the stick is like without any profile. So this is what happens when I start the computer. So if there's some kind of effect going, I don't want it to shake my house to pieces, so I limit it here. This is quite a lot of periodic force strength anyway, so. But the real deal here is the maximum force available. And this is not a setting per se. It is something you measure, and then you tell the system, I have measured it 17 kilos with these settings. So what this means is when I give it 40 on this scale and 100 on this scale, I'm getting 17 kilos of max pull on both axes. It's the same motor on both axes. And what this means is that when I load a profile, possibly made by me or somebody else, and it has all the forces in kilos, then my system knows, for example, if the profile calls for 5 kilos of angle of attack force, then it knows how much force it needs to give my joystick to provide exactly 5 kilos. It's kind of neat. And this is again only kind of relevant if you have this kind of force available to you. Because this brings you into the range of realistic aircraft controllers. And people have created like real forces for many different planes, and this is how it works. I think that's like a really neat feature. I like it a lot. And especially the idea. And the fact that I can have realistic forces. But that's pretty much it. There's still some options for, like for example, the electronics. I haven't set any of these, I don't have to, because GVL did this for me. And I also have, for example, the stick. Okay, it's saying Mongoose, I'm not actually using that right now. But this doesn't matter really. And it can use many different kinds of grips directly. What I'm using is a VKB MCGU, but I'm using an adapter and a black box, so this system doesn't even see it. But this is the list currently, I believe, of compatible grips, directly compatible. I suggest you recheck this list if you want to use a specific grip, because this can change and will change in time. But yeah, that's basically it for the Beast. These are the basic settings for it. Now, the same thing for the Rhino. This is kind of interesting, because the first tab is Effects. Okay. And then there's the settings where you have this master gain and other features. And these are all at 100 right now. It's quite safe on the Rhino. It's not quite as powerful as the Beast. Of course it can shake itself to pieces because it still is quite strong stick. But yeah, it's quite simple. And the difference here is it has one extra potentiometer that I'm using for setting periodic effects gain right now. But just like the Beast, you can also use different grips on it. Here's the button mapping for those. I have never really used, well actually I once tried the Mongoose grip on this, so I can't say too much about that. I don't use that because I have, like I said, I have the VKB, and just like with the FFBeast, that one is used with an adapter and a black box. But this is where stuff gets kind of interesting. So the same basic stuff is right here. And then we have the effects, like we have adaptive recentering and all kinds of neat stuff. You can do dampers. I do dampers and springs. There's also inertia, which I frankly don't understand myself, but I don't have to understand it. If somebody wants inertia, fine by me. We have end stops, friction, hardware force trim, by the way. Both of these do hardware force trim. So you can do a helicopter style or trimmer hat style hardware force trim, which can be super useful, and it can be also considered a bit cheating maybe, but you can do that with force feedback. But I'm not going to go deep into that stuff. There's a lot of different kinds of settings for both of these. But what is the main point of this comparison is right here. The expert settings on the Rhino. First of all, max motor current 25 amps. I think these are default settings. Maybe. Max PSU current 4 amps. Okay, fine. Now, as far as I can tell, there's nothing like that in the Beast. It'll basically draw whatever it seems to need at any point. You just have to set your power limit to the kind of level where your power source and your motors can handle it. And of course all the other stuff as well. So if you have the settings wrong, you might actually get into some real trouble. Like, I've read about blown motor coils and so on, and I suppose you can also maybe blow the board or something. Probably the most benign thing is the power source shutting itself down, but that also resets your controller, and at least in TCS your flight is over. But on the Rhino you can set the max motor current to whatever you want, and also the max PSU current, so that it never overdraws. And this is quite useful protection. Now again, this is like a store-bought Rhino with default settings, so I haven't done anything to those. Then we have stuff like natural damping compensation, which is kind of interesting. Like it says here, it works like power steering. It actually helps you move the stick. Now, why would you want that? Because usually, like, I personally like to have a lot of power on my stick, and this will actually help you move your stick, so why? Now, it's actually quite clever. In a completely ideal situation, you start with a totally blank slate. Like a completely smooth, blank stick. And then you start adding effects like spring and damper on top of that. And this is what this specific function provides. So ideally, if you have this kind of thing enabled, your stick will feel like nothing when your master gain or spring is at 0. Now that is of course really idealistic. And I don't know how much this actually does for me. I have never tried it off, if I even know this. But it's a kind of a neat idea. And it's representative of the design philosophy between these two devices. They have different motors, different boards, and different everything. And then you have proportional damping and stuff. I think, if I understood correctly, the Beast has dynamic dampening, which is basically kind of similar, maybe. But then we have low-pass filters. Probably, I think these are intended mostly for preventing unwanted oscillation and stuff. We have the buzzer, which needs to be off because it's annoying. And then we can probably save configurations and stuff. But the thing is, also if you look at the left side here, there's some other interesting stuff. We have, of course, I'm now moving the stick here, so it's reacting. And you can see the basic stuff. We have the X and Y positions. We have the dx and dy, which is basically the speed of change, which is useful for inertial calculations. And then we have the second derivative, which is, how do you say that? It is the speed of the change of position, so how fast the acceleration changes. And these are basically just used for calculations. And not very useful to show here, but hey, if you can, why not? And then you have, I think this tells you how much force it's using at any given point. And these are the raw readings from the sensors. Here's the main X and Y readings. Here's the potentiometer I told you about. It's just a small wheel on top of the Rhino. And here's the current. Like, here's what's happening when I pull the stick. It gives you quite a bit of amps, and I have to emphasize the Rhino is not a weak stick. It's actually, if you've used only normal regular gimbal systems, Rhino is probably stronger than anything you've used before. And here's the current for both axes, and this is again part of the protection, like there's a max current for every motor. But here's the big deal. Both motors have a temperature. Now that's quite a bit higher than the ambient right now. I don't know why, but it says 30 degrees both. And what happens is that if I start like pulling max on the stick, the temperatures will start going up. And it's not happening super fast, but it will start happening right now. And the important thing is what happens when the temp really gets high. The Rhino will soon, I'd say about 50 degrees or something, you can set those settings right now. It will first start the fans and then it will start reducing the maximum force. It will prevent you from overheating the motors. And that's a big deal. And it also, if you are making measurements or writing reviews on this stuff, it's super helpful to know when you have a result. Like when I did stress testing on the Beast, I just spent an hour dogfighting MiG-29s and used my hand basically to test how hot the motors got. And they did get quite hot when I did the maximum power test to 1 hour. Now there were no problems, I noticed, but I noticed that the motor did get hot. And if I had continued, it would have probably got hot enough to just melt a coil or something. I don't really know, but I guess that could happen. Now the Rhino, that will never happen. Now the difference here is that, of course, the Rhino will start overheating relatively quickly, like maybe 10 minutes of that kind of dogfighting. It will start fans and start reducing the force. And it's not a drastic reduction, it will drop to about 50% maximum in a reasonable time, and you kind of do notice it, but it's not a jarring change or anything really. It's perfectly controllable all the way through. But of course, at 50% you are not getting that much force anymore. So it's not ideal, but it's really, really good to know that the Rhino has your back. It's never going to overheat. Whatever you do to it, as long as you don't have anything crazy in these current settings, the Rhino will have you covered. And to me, that's a pretty big deal. Now, of course, I did the stress testing for the Beast, and it's fine max power for 1 hour of dogfighting MiGs, probably more than that. I don't know how much more, and that's part of the problem, but it's okay. It did it. I'm happy with the result. So, I guess there's an argument to be made that you don't need this kind of protections if you just have so much power, but then again, I have read about blown coils on Beasts, so there's that too. But most importantly, this is just part of the design philosophy difference here. And if you look at these lower parts of the Rhino settings, you have force compensation and stuff. So basically what this means is that when you calibrate the device, and for example the Beast calibrates itself, it's kind of really neat. You don't have to calibrate. Every time you start it, it calibrates itself and finds the limits and the numbers, which is nice. However, there's always going to be some flex in systems. Both of these use like pulleys, and there's always some stretch in those systems. So what this does is it compensates for that stretch in the pulleys and the belts. Well, the pulleys probably are not stretching very much, but the belts are. And basically this means that when you do max power, max pull, you will get the max deflection every time if you use this compensation. And again, it's not a gigantic deal. You can, for example, go in game and check what your actual maximum is on the Beast, and then just adjust accordingly in game, which is fine. But this is just that one tiny step further. And I think that is kind of the story here. So the Rhino is like a super sophisticated product for what it is. I have always been fascinated by just what kind of a productization Valmis did. Like my serial number is 30 something and there are about 1,000 Rhinos out there. But from the very start, this is such a well thought out product. Now both of these are do-it-yourself products that somebody else built for me. But the Rhino is just one step further, or maybe even 2 steps further in many regards. Like it has all these protections and all these fine little details in damping compensation and all this stuff that makes it super smooth to use. And in this design philosophy, I think the main result is that every time I use the Rhino, like I'm using right now, you probably notice, it's just unfathomably smooth. Whenever I shut it down and put it away, like right now I'm using the Beast mostly, I kind of have to restart it and retry it again to remind myself of just how insanely fucking smooth it is. And I think that's the result of this design philosophy difference. Like the Rhino is super smooth all the way through. Now the Beast isn't bad, but if you start hunting for those cogging like slight fluctuations in power, especially at low power settings, you will find them. Now I think Propeller 3D said that it's going to be about 10 grams on one configuration, and my Beast is kind of an extra powerful one. It has the most powerful motors GVL does, and its gearing ratio is intended to make maximum amount of force, and that means that it's going to emphasize heavily everything that happens in the motors, which means that the cogging is also probably somewhat more than on a typical Beast. And it's not a massive amount, but if you go hunting for it, you will find it. I can show you a little bit, but of course it doesn't make any difference because you can't really feel it anyway. But if you really go find those spots where you get this kind of wavy feedback, you will feel them. Now, well, you won't, but I do. And it's really not that much, but it is there. In a way where on the Rhino it's just not. And that probably didn't help you at all, but that's just my observation. And you can see it like in this design philosophy. And I think this is where the Rhino pulls ahead slightly. All these protections and super smooth operation. When you are not using the power of the Beast, the Rhino has an advantage. It's just a little bit ahead in the feel. And I think that's the second important point after all the power of the Beast. Like, the power is awesome and I love it, but if you don't use that power, then the Rhino is ahead. And of course I've used the Rhino for 3 years, I've loved it every second, and I still do. And I've only had the Beast for 3 months, but I think I've used it enough to make that kind of conclusion. But basically that's the main difference between, or the second main difference between two devices. And I think I can also make the main conclusion here already here. I'll talk about this stuff a little bit more, but my conclusion right now is that basically that if you want more power than the Rhino can give you, the Beast is of course the clear winner in these two, because the Rhino can't give you that much power. You want that much power, well, you have to get the Beast. There is no alternative. However, if you're operating below the Rhino's maximum power, and I have to emphasize again that the Rhino is not weak. It's just comparatively weaker than the Beast, because almost everything out there is. But if you are happy with the Rhino amount of power, it's just that little bit smoother, little bit more better protected and everything. So it draws ahead in the finesse department. And I'll also show you the basics of the Beast software. And this is basically what it does. You can load all kind of profiles and add effects. Now I don't have much here. Let's say I want to have prop airflow on an F-18. I can add the effect, then I can start adjusting it. Total effect strength, and this is kind of weird. This shows percentages, but I think these are supposed to be kilos, and some of them show percentages and they are actually kilos, and some of them show kilos and they are actually percentages. Like check these axes, like that's in kilos, that's supposedly in kilos. And these are kind of mixed currently in some cases, but again that's totally workable and not a big deal, but it's just those little kinds of details. And there are a lot of different kinds of effects, and a lot of different kind of games are supported. Again, you really need to check these out yourself when you are watching this or when you intend to buy any of these, because this all changes all the time. Now I'd love to show you the Telem FFE, but like I said, I don't think I can install the latest firmware on the Rhino, and the latest version of the Telem FFB require that, so maybe you'll just have to take my word for it, but I prefer the Telem FFB over this. It's a little bit more mature again, like most of the stuff on the Rhino. And I don't want to knock on the FFBeast software. It's good, it does its job, but Rhino is just that tiny bit ahead. And both of these will do the job just fine, I'm not saying that. But I'm going to give the Rhino a little bit more points on the software side, and also hardware side when it comes to finesse. And of course you can download the Telem FFB and the FFBeast commander and see for yourself what they actually do. I don't think either actually needs the base to function. You probably won't get the full functionality, but yeah, you can check all these options and so on. And there are little things here, like, for example, I'd really like to be able to, like the Rhino does here, you can adjust both axes at the same time, like right, left, up, down, and so on. I'd really much like to use both elevator and axis at the same time. It's not that much more work to, for example, adjust the spring strength for both of course on the Hornet, and quite often I use different kind of spring strength here, so that's fine. But when I do like dampers and so on, I want the same for both, so I wish I could do it for both axes. But this is just again the little details, but the little details also matter a bit. And I have no doubt that Propeller will do all kinds of little detail stuff when he has the time, and this develops all the time, and there are all kinds of good things coming. You can check out his Discord, he has all kinds of roadmaps there, and you can request features, and he's really good with that kind of stuff, and so is Valmis. Now the difference of course here, which I find interesting, is that Telem FFB is open source 100%, so there's a community working on it, which is kind of unfair comparison compared to Propeller, who does everything himself, I believe. But then again, that's not really unfair when it comes to the user, because the user only sees the end result. And obviously open source has the advantage that if Propeller for some reason doesn't have the time or the resources to keep developing his stuff, the open source version Telem FFB will keep developing, even if Valmis doesn't do anything to it. But to reiterate, this software is kind of difficult to compare because it's constantly developing, and I don't know how much these both are going to develop. But my conclusion here is that the Rhino has a clear advantage in finesse, and its software is slightly ahead in functionality and somewhat ahead in usability. I just simply prefer it. But the Beast software is perfectly usable, and in the end, the amount of time you spend in the software is hopefully minimal compared to the amount you spend flying. So even if it takes a little more effort in one, then it's not that important in the big picture. But here you go. I just wanted to give you a quick look at the different software on the different devices, because the main point I wanted to make with this software was the difference in finesse, all these protections and measurements the Rhino does. And I think that matters quite a bit, and it shows in the end result. That's the most important thing. The Rhino is like unfathomably smooth, and the Beast is not bad. And it's important to notice in the Beast, when I talk about the cogging, it's not proportional to the power. So when you increase the power, the cogging basically disappears because it doesn't increase, and the damping and the power will drown it basically. But if you are using the sticks in the power ranges of the Rhino, then the Rhino is simply a little bit smoother, and it's a fantastic experience. Okay, so I'll show you one more funny little thing in the end here. I already spoke about power and controllability, and this is just a nice little trick I can do. Now look closely to the Beast's roll axis, like right here where my cursor is. I'm taking a piece of paper and pushing on the stick just ever so slightly. I mean, that's just insane combination of power, precision and accuracy. Now, the Rhino can basically do the same, and notice that they have very different scales, but if you look at the y-axis on the left here, I'll try the same thing on the Rhino. Well, actually it's the x-axis of course, but it does the same thing. Slightly pushing it with a sheet of paper makes it move tiniest amount, and it registers instantly. Now don't look at the numbers too closely. Like I said, they have very different scales. But there's just a tiny little interesting snippet for you. Now, this set of videos is not generically about force feedback. It's a very specific thing about comparison between two different platforms, but I guess it's a decent enough an idea to make a case for force feedback in general. So, first of all, force feedback can do all kinds of interesting things we've already seen, like force trim or normal trim in general for planes that are not like this. And then you can do all kind of shake effects like stall shaker, and when you shoot a gun or use the air brakes or something like that. So yeah, that's easy enough to understand. Even if you are the kind of person who watches my video, I guess you can still handle that. So why are we in an F-18? Well, of course I could add any kind of effects on this plane too with the Beast software. It can do that. But I currently don't have them active. So why am I here? Well, to make a specific point. I already mentioned all that good stuff. And it's the kind of stuff that people first think about when they think about force feedback. But here's the deal. Force feedback sticks feel better than anything else. They have insane adjustability. Like, I can just go out there and, okay, I don't like the relationship between elevator and aileron, so I'm going to change that a bit. I'm not going to even touch the joystick base. I'll just go to the software and change some settings and I'm ready to go. And then I can save it in a profile, and I don't even have to select the profile. The software will do that for me automatically. Then I switch planes and it automatically loads a different profile. Well, to be fair, I'm currently having some issues with the Beast software where it remembers the first couple of planes I did, and the others I have to load manually, but even that's not a big deal. I don't know if it's my fault or not. Probably, usually is. But anyway, there's an immense amount of adjustability right here, and it's so simple. The second thing is, I can have a lot of damping without any kind of hint of stiction, so if you look at that, it's pretty solid for the stick. Now, it's also possible to, at least on the Rhino, to add some inertia to your stick, but okay, if you want that, fine. However, I've never understood that at all. Like, real sticks are not supposed to have inertia. They're supposed to be resistance at the base. You're supposed to feel like the stick is connected to the base and you are fighting some kind of a force that acts on the very base of the stick. Not like a metronome bouncing up, forward, back, left to right when you release the stick. That's what normal sticks do, because they have springs and gimbals to a varying degree. Now, what the manufacturers of regular sticks do is they add some kind of dry clutches or maybe even proper dampers, especially on pedals where you have a lot of space. And my experiences vary, and on the whole I've never seen a dry clutch that would come close to stiction-free damping. And I haven't experimented a lot with Neogel, or however you pronounce that shit. And supposedly that does a pretty good job. I don't know. Whatever I've tried hasn't really worked. There's always some stiction, and personally for me, and I do understand that's some kind of a personal view. I've read stuff about people, how they use maximum dry clutch power and so on. And that feels just horrific for me. but apparently not for everyone, so keep that in mind. I'm very sensitive to stiction. But in comparison, when I use force feedback, I can add mind-boggling amounts of damping, and I do, because that's how I like my sticks. And of course that's going to vary, but I could make a case that this is kind of how the real sticks actually feel like. They're supposed to feel kind of solid and not springy. And that's what you get with a lot of damping. And how damping works on a force feedback stick is it will start to act when the stick moves. So when the stick's just like this, it does nothing at all, absolutely nothing. As I showed on the Rhino software, there's like the first and second derivative of motion, which is acceleration and the rapidity of acceleration. And those are the things that force feedback damping acts upon. So when my stick starts to move, the system will start resisting that movement up to the amount I asked it to. And what that means is that when the movement or acceleration is 0 or close to 0, there's nothing happening as far as dampening. And what that means is that there is absolute zero stiction that could ever happen. Well, of course, there's the mechanics and stuff inside the stick, but that is utterly minimal. At least I can't feel anything at all. And I can take like a sheet of paper and push on the stick and it will start changing values, so that's how little stiction there is. So basically that's it for force feedback in general in this video. There's a lot to be said about it, but I just wanted to make a point about it. If you are interested in force feedback, good for you, you are on the right track. It's better than anything out there. And one of the biggest travesties in Flight Simulator hobby is that we've gone without force feedback for close to 20 years. But now it's here and you are right to be interested. If you're watching my video, which you probably are, you're probably the kind of person who doesn't make very good choices. But I can assure you that getting interested in force feedback is a fantastic choice. And if you can afford it, which is a big ask, it's the way to go. It's just better. And I wanted to emphasize the fact that the best thing about force feedback is the feel. And then you get all these effects and all the force trims and all that stuff that's icing on the cake. But it's really, really fantastic icing also. So yes, regardless of what platform you go for, as long as it's a good working functional platform, force feedback really is just as amazing as you think it could be. It is amazing. But that's it for force feedback in general. This is more about comparison between these two platforms. Alright, time for the preliminary final conclusions. So, I think I already kind of gave the game away a bit, or a lot, earlier. And I haven't changed my mind in the couple of minutes between. So this is essentially all going to be about power and control. But the important thing here is to remember, even though the Rhino is much less powerful than the Beast, it's still quite strong. And even though the Rhino does have the finesse, doesn't mean that the Beast doesn't have control. On the contrary, in some circumstances I would rate the Beast higher in the control. Like for example right now, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is probably the finest experience I've ever had holding a stick. The power doesn't get in the way of controllability, at least at these levels and in any reasonable circumstance. But still, I think the main point applies. The Rhino is a fantastically smooth, accurate device that takes care of you. It measures the temperatures, handles the cooling automatically, and it will just look after you under any circumstance. Now, in practice, at least in the testing I've done, the Beast kind of doesn't have to. So that's a good point to make. I still would say that I would love to see this kind of protections even on the Beast. But it's not a meaningless point to make that the Beast just doesn't need to. But at least when I did that test, 1 hour of MIGs at max power, max rated power, yeah, it's true, the Beast took it. However, the elevator motor was running so hot that I kind of think that if I would have continued, I would have eventually blown a coil or something. That's pretty catastrophic. And you really don't want that to happen, and I'm pretty sure I could have forced that. But also 1 hour of shooting down MIGs is a pretty good test for most use cases. Now, I can totally understand if you want to practice dogfighting, you might want to go on for longer, and that could be a problem for the Beast if you go max power. But then again, you might not need to go max power, and even dropping a little bit below probably already has a huge impact. Like the first test at a little bit less than max power I did, it didn't even get really that warm at all. I could feel that it's getting warmer, but nothing close to the max power test. So your mileage may vary. But then again, the Beast, although it's a super powerful stick, it's not like godly powerful. You do need that power. And I can foresee myself running it at max power or close to it, so that warming up will absolutely be a concern for me. Now, one thing I didn't do, and what I might have done, or maybe should have done, but yeah, I can't be arsed right now, was to prolong dogfights with World War I planes, because that's another use case where you get a lot of stress on the stick. Luckily for most, World War II is a use case or the best case scenario for force feedback, and it's super popular. And in World War II scenarios, you generally don't ham-fist the stick as much as you do in World War I or World War III. And you get all those neat effects and the like, so basically you get less stress and you get all the goodies in the most popular front, so that's a win for force feedback. And the Beast will shine in that too. So basically, what it boils down to is, if you need more power or want more power than the Rhino will provide, well, the Rhino doesn't provide more power than it does, so your choice will be the Beast. But if you operate in the regime where the Rhino provides enough power for you, and I'm going to remind you, it's not a weak stick. If you only used regular gimbal stuff, the Rhino is probably more powerful than what you've had before, by a decent margin. Now, if you operate in that area, the finesse on the Rhino is going to win out. The main point is that there is And this is like to the Beast made by GVL224, remember that? The Rhino is basically factory made, the one I've tested, but this is just one Beast out of many, and this is an especially powerful one. Probably not the most powerful one out there, but it's probably on the top end. It's got the most powerful motors and pretty high gearing ratio. So it's going to feel whatever happens on the motors, or I'm going to feel whatever happens on the motors more than on many other builds. But when the forces are relatively low, I can definitely feel some amount of cogging. And it's not bad. It's like a wavy response. But it's just something that I don't find on the Rhino. And I think that's a reasonable amount of plus for the Rhino. That's not a small thing. Well, that's not an insignificant thing. It's not game breaking or huge, but definitely points for the Rhino. But yeah, in addition to that, another point for the finesse is the Rhino software is ahead. Both software are developing constantly, but I remember when I followed the Telem FFB initially, it was like riding a rocket ship, and it hasn't stopped. And I'm not saying the Beast software is bad. It does what it's supposed to do, and it's just going to get better. But there is an extra layer of finesse and options and stuff on the Rhino software, and there's some weirdness in the Beast, like I swear some of the kilos are actually percentages and some of the percentages are actually kilos. So, but again, nothing you can't overcome, but it's there. And like I mentioned, I'm having some trouble with the automatic profile switching. A few of the first ones I did work perfectly, others I have to switch manually. And again, it works, and I don't know, maybe it's my fault, I'm not sure. But that's again something that isn't there on the Rhino. And again, most importantly, by the time you're watching this, that may already have changed. And obviously it could change for the worse, but usually it doesn't. Now both bases support many different kind of grips, and that's another topic all in itself. But note that when it comes to the Beast and the Rhino, the choice in grips is actually really interesting. I don't know what grips the Windwing or Mosa support, but you'll have to check it out for themselves, for yourself. But keep in mind that when you are working with a big producer like Windwing, they might want you to buy their own grip too, so... Wow, what the fuck's that? Anyway, keep in mind that you might want to check out the support for different grips, whatever platform you are buying into, because also that's going to change in time. So to keep the rambling to almost mediocre levels, that's it. The Rhino is ahead in the lower power regime, and then obviously the Beast is currently the only game in town if you want this much power. Do you want this much power? Well, that's up to you. I kind of do. Now, I'm always going to love the Rhino because it's the miracle of force feedback that happened to me 3 years ago, and it's still an incredible platform. But for now I'm going to be using the Beast. I am a power kind of a guy, and you can see my bulging muscles, so your mileage will probably vary. But there are a couple of important misconceptions I'm going to fix here in the end. Like, I'm completely tired of hearing that the Beast is better because it's made of metal. Now there are a couple of interesting things about being made of metal, like for example, I liked ease of maintenance on the Beast. You just open a couple of big bolts and you have access to a lot of the interior. You also have maintenance hatches, and sure enough, those would be difficult if not impossible to do in a wooden construction. So yep, that's a kind of a plus, smallish, not insignificant but not a gigantic plus for the Beast. However, during normal operation I don't really touch the base at all, it's kind of pointless. So how the hell am I supposed to know if it's made of metal or wood? I just don't. And I had the Rhino for 3 years, so okay, I admit I also had some skepticism, not so much for the wood but for the 3D printed parts inside. So what I did was I ran thorough tests initially, and then I ran the Rhino for 3 years at pretty much maximum power. And the result is that it has held. I needed to tighten one screw in the gimbal after about 3 years of use, and now it's like new. I don't know, of course, if it's going to break down on me tomorrow, but it probably won't. So basically, where the Rhino operates in the strength regime, it's held up for 3 years, and I think that's a pretty definitive test. And as for the Beast, well, the build by GVL feels super solid. I don't have any special reason to doubt it, but it's a mechanical thing and it's handling enormous amounts of force, so I don't know. So far it's holding up really good, but that's only about 3 months of use, of which maybe 2 months is at maximum power. So yeah, I just really don't want to hear that crap about wood and 3D printing. The Rhino structure is perfectly fine. The problem with it, the biggest problem probably is that it doesn't scale very well. If you want to build like 1,000,000 Rhinos, you probably need to make it out of metal or plastic. But there are 1,000+ Rhinos out there made of wood, and they are perfectly fine despite or because of being made of wood. So that's basically the misconception I don't want to see anymore. And I like metal, I like my stick is metal and stuff, but wood and 3D printing is perfectly fine when done fine. And obviously the Rhino is the smoothest platform I've ever seen, and that's 3D printing, so yeah, basically that's it. So, final note. Comparing the Rhino and the Beast, they are kind of similar ballpark in price, which is super expensive. Now, are they worth it? That's a question I can't answer for you. If you are incredibly rich and $1,000 means nothing to you, yeah, they're obviously worth it. Or if more like me, you really love simulator flying, you love force feedback, and who wouldn't? But you don't have all the money in the world, then maybe it's worth it. Depends. And the best I can do is provide some kind of idea on what they do and what they feel like. That's completely up to you. I can't help you there very much. However, there's an important caveat to be made. I've tried the Rhino and the Beast, but they are not the only game in town. For example, currently Moza has like 9 Nm, which is kind of the Rhino range, and a 6 Nm unit available. And they are much cheaper than either of these options. no, well, I guess I have to talk about the controversy of Moza using open source software from the Rhino project and not providing their own changes to it back, which is what the GPL license requires. So even though they are utilizing open source software, they are kind of presumably, and I've seen reasonably enough evidence so that I personally believe that they are. Now, so they are basically pirating VP Force software. And that's not cool, and I don't take my word for it. You can find discussions on this online and make up your own minds, but because I think that there has been some foul play there, I can't just ignore that. Now, it's not crimes against humanity and so on, and from what I can tell from people who use the Moza stuff, it works fine. I don't know. But that's out there and it's much cheaper. How good it is, I've never tried one myself, so I don't know. But it exists. And as I'm filming this stuff, Winwing is about to release their force feedback stuff, or sticks, which could be a game changer because some of their models are as powerful as the Beast. Supposedly, like I said, I haven't tested them and few other people have, so there you go. And they are going to be in a lower price range, so maybe they are going to be good, maybe they won't, I don't know, no idea. But as always, there are some caveats, and you can do force feedback really badly. So my suggestion is, especially with the Winwing stuff, don't be the first one to jump into that bandwagon. Let at least a few guys try it out first and post about it on Reddit or YouTube or wherever. At least so that if there are like big mistakes in them, then you will know about it beforehand. And I don't especially expect Winwing to make big mistakes. They've been around for a while and they kind of know what they are doing. Their project took a while and they are only now releasing them after announcing them like a year or two ago, I don't remember exactly. So it's probably going to be fine, but how good are they going to be? How powerful? No idea. They could be a really good buy. But there are things to consider, like for example with Moza and Winwing, which I haven't tested. I did some stress testing on the Rhino and you know how it works. It's going to start the fans and reduce the power and take care of you. It will never overheat. The Beast, it can take a lot of punishment, like a lot, but I'm pretty sure that I could overheat it fatally. And I haven't proven that, and I won't go that far, I don't have to. And I'm scared of doing it because I want to keep using the Beast without interruptions. But I bet I could overheat it catastrophically. So how about the Winwing and the Moza? No idea. I have no idea what kind of protections either of them have. And I just don't know. But the thing is, if for example stick X or base X can provide you 60 Newton meters for one pull and then it shuts down, and even if there's protection it doesn't kill itself, it shuts down, your flight's over and you're done. That's not really good, is it? And that's probably not what will happen, but maybe let somebody test it out first. Because in theory something like that in probably a bit lesser form is a distinct possibility. And also, as I mentioned, I don't know what kind of grips you get to use with wing. Now basically wing grips are pretty good, so if you're limited to wing stuff, then you're kind of okay. But yeah, that's it. So as for the Rhino the Beast, I've said my piece. As for the other joysticks out there, I don't know, I haven't tested them, but they could really be an option, mainly because they are so much cheaper. But in this time and age, I'm kind of happy about the main controllers in my cockpit being proudly European made. No offense to anyone, but in this time and age that's really a thing. So I'm happy with what I have, but if you're looking into buying this stuff, you might have a lot of things to consider. Now a final small note. I've been talking about power a lot. And one interesting thing here is that all these grips we have, like VKB, Virpil, Thrustmaster, Wing, all that stuff, it's been designed for something that is a fraction of this power. So how do the grips handle it? Now, as I mentioned before, I accidentally pulled 15 kilos through a regular VKB grip and a plastic adapter, and it held. Like, it made sounds and bent a bit, which is not what you want, but it didn't break instantly, which is... Well, it was kind of surprising to me pulling 15 kilos through that. I would have said earlier that it's never going to hold even once, but it held once. So, yeah, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but I'm going to make a couple of guesses because I've now had this much power available to me for a couple of months, which is more than most people, so here's a couple of guesses. First of all, VKB, which I have here. Now, I don't have the latest interface, it's the one before that. But using that, it's like super flimsy metal thing that connects to the grip. I would not be happy putting that amount of power through it consistently. It held surprisingly well in my tests, but my gut feeling, and I could be wrong, I already was kind of wrong about my expectations, but my gut feel tells me that it's not going to hold long term. If you want to use VKB grips with this Beast base at high power, I suggest buying an adapter like the one I have from Propeller 3D. It feels super solid, it's kind of fiddly to install, but it does the job. And this feels solid enough to use forever, so now I'm super happy with it. So VKB, I don't trust it with this kind of power, but an adapter is available and that's the perfect solution. Okay, so how about Wing? Earlier I would have said no. However, after trying this for a while, and unless I'm mistaken, Wing said that their current lineup should be fine for their Taurus lineup, some of which handle about 60 Newton meters of torque, so I do not know. That's the best I can say. Maybe, maybe not. Before I would have said nope, but now that I've tested this and I saw how the VKB adapter didn't die instantly, maybe the Wing can handle it, especially if they tell you it can, then who am I to say no? So Thrustmaster, I've broken one of those and it just snapped in half when I accidentally kicked it a little bit, and it wasn't a hard kick. like just kneed it when I climbed out of the cockpit. And it snapped clean off in the weakest point at the base. And that weak point is really fucking weak because it's made of scrap metal. And it's a thin pipe connecting the grip to the base, and all the electric cables run through it. Basically like with all of these, but the Thrustmaster materials I don't trust at all. Now again, I can't say definitively that they won't hold, but I would not trust them. I think they're significantly weaker than the others because of the materials used. Also, Thrustmaster currently has an F16 and an F18 grip, and so does the Windwing, and if you can use Windwing grips, I think they're just better in every way, so I would take those anyway. They are much lighter and I like their feel more. So for Thrustmaster, I don't know, but my gut feel says that it won't last. So Virpil. I think it's pretty similar to Windwing. I can't compare them directly, I haven't even looked at them so closely. But I know people who have used Virpil stuff like JVL does, and it works for them. So it probably works. Now I would want to see a more sturdier construction, like it's still quite a thin tube that connects the grip to everything else. But it's probably some kind of reasonable metal, and it's probably going to work okayish, and many people are using that stuff with the Beast and it's working, so again, I don't know, maybe, possibly, probably. So I think that's pretty much it for this video and this stuff. I'll get back to the subject later on if something comes up. I've only used this for a couple of months, so I don't know about the durability and stuff. I will only learn that in time. But I am in an incredibly fortunate position to have tested both these amazing devices, so I thought the least bad thing I can do for people who haven't tested them is to make this kind of stupid video. And although most of my conclusions aren't very conclusive, maybe you get some kind of an idea of what they are like, absolutely, and compared to each other. So that's pretty much it. If you watched this video all the way up to here, what's wrong with you? Go do something useful with your life.